Good evening, everyone. My name is Dave Laney. Welcome back, and I'm really excited for today's interview. I get to welcome my friend Maneesh Somisetty, current rotational finance analyst intern at L Brands. Welcome, Maneesh.
Hi.
Thank you, first of all, for your time. We really appreciate you taking the time to give us an interview as to how to land a job at a place like L Brands. So let's hop right into it. So first off, why L Brands?
Yeah, so I had two previous internships. They were around manufacturing companies. One of them was Worthington Industries. It's pretty local. And through that experience, I kind of realized that that wasn't where I wanted to work in that industry. I wanted something that was faster paced, constantly changing every day. In retail specifically, you look at the past day's results and you make changes to be better the next day. So I really like that part of retail, consumer goods, those type of companies where if you're stuck in your ways, there's so much competition that there's no way you're going to stay ahead. So you have to constantly move. It's a younger culture. That's one of the things I really liked about it. So that's why I kind of picked L Brands.
Yeah, absolutely. So, kind of delving into that, how does a current freshman at Ohio State land this type of role? So let's kind of walk through that. In terms of the application process, where did you first see this job?
Yeah, so pretty much all the internships I applied to were through Fisher, and the school, they have their own website and lists of who recruits through Ohio State. And once you know a company is recruiting through Ohio State, it's easier to land it because they're purposely trying to find students from your school. So that really helped having that connection to the school.
So, when you mean, recruited through the school, does it mean, it's other than just being on the company website?
So during the beginning of the year, there'll be a lot of internship fairs, career fairs.
Yeah.
So I actually went to a finance career fair, this Fisher career fair, the school-wide career fair. And then I met the same recruiter with L Brands several times. She remembered me. She remembered my application and my resume. So that's really how you put yourself out there. You might leave a lasting impression the first time, but if you don't follow up with that recruiter, see her several times, she'll forget about you. So that's really how that happened. After the second and third career fair, she knew me. She knew that I was capable. She had seen my resume several times. So that's really how that relationship got started.
Okay, and I think that's a really key point there. So you said you followed up with her. Did you send her a thank you note after meeting with her? What did that look like?
Yeah, the first time they give out business cards, I emailed her. She said, okay, apply, there's a waiting list. And so I didn't want to be just another person on that list. So Definitely. Then you continue to contact her. You actually stand and have conversations with her or him, obviously, during the career fairs. And so that's when they really start remembering you, once they start getting several emails and really you're showing interest and not just oh, I want an internship. You're interested in their company and what they're doing. And then there's a second part to that, really studying up on what they do, what that role is, what the company does, what type of people they're hiring. And then once you start showing that much interest, they know that, this isn't just another company to you that's on your list, you want to work there. And that's really how you stand out, I feel like.
Absolutely. I think that's a really key piece of advice there. So kind of switching roles back into the actual role. So when you apply, you see this online and you're meeting with this recruiter, do you know exactly what position you're applying for, or do you just know that, L Brands?
Yeah, so obviously it'll be major based. There'll be marketing, internships, and finance.
And what's your major by chance?
So I'm finance and economics. So I knew I wanted to be finance, and it took me actually several years to realize what in finance. When students come in to college typically and they're in finance, pretty much they're with, investment banking or consulting. That's what you're told. That's your two options. And So obviously I went through 2 years of just trying to figure out, if that's for me. Some points I thought I wanted investment banking, some points consulting, financial services, things like that. But then when I started to realize that I was really interested in finance, but also marketing, understanding the customer, following trends, and staying ahead of competition. Those are things that aren't really part of the investment banking or consulting role. You don't work with customers. You don't understand what they want and how you can provide it. So that's when I started realizing, retail, consumer goods was my field that I wanted to go into.
Okay.
And then really providing a product for a customer and seeing the physical product in the stores, online, things like that. And this role specifically, a lot of people going into a big company like L Brands, you kind of get stuck. You can start in one position and then you try to move up You have to almost wait for the person above you to retire, and then you can move up. But this role specifically is rotational finance analyst intern. So initially there was 100 people interviewing. They were picking 12 for this internship position specifically. And then the point of this internship is really an interview process the whole summer to get you into the rotational finance analyst full-time. So that really 6 of those 12 will be picked for that. And that is 2 years, 6-month rotations. So every 6 months you get put into, it might be a different brand, different function. You can be in the FP&A or you can be in more of an analyst, different roles within the company. Okay. Every 6 months you rotate, which is not an opportunity a lot of students get. A lot of times you start in a position and you're in that for 5 years maybe before you move on. So with this rotation, you really get to experience every part of the company. Okay. And then after 2 years, you get placed within the company in a senior financial analyst role. And a lot of times that takes 4 or 5 years to get put into a senior finance analyst role. So here, right after 2 years, they've already invested so much money in you. Typically, you don't become a productive worker for a year into your role, and you're switching every 6 months. So really, you're just learning for 6 months, and you don't really add anything to the company, and then all of a sudden you move on. So it's really not beneficial for the company. It's the end of the day, after 2 years, you've had so much experience that they know that you know what you're doing, and then they put you in that type of role. So that's really the goal, to get to the senior financial analyst role within the company.
Absolutely. That's definitely nice that, you spent the time in finance, you've kind of found out that you don't want to be part of the investment banking. And now that you've kind of figured out within your time a little bit in L Brands where you want to head, which is super nice. So let's step back here, kind of back to the application process.
Yeah.
So you've met the recruiter on campus maybe once or twice now. What are these next steps now? Is there like an online portion?
So really, I work with actual younger kids through my business fraternity and different programs to get them ready to apply for internships. First of all, I think the number one thing a college student can do is get internships early. It might be difficult. A lot of people don't think they can get an internship freshman year, but if you use everyone you connect with everyone, it's possible that you can get it. And I think that's one of the competitive advantage I had. I had real life experience that I could talk to during an interview of actual what happened in a company rather than a club or class project or whatever. So first of all, it's perfecting your resume. There's a lot of resources. Luckily, I had my business fraternity, so that has its own resources. But Fisher, any school you go to, there will be resources. So perfecting that, the amount of resumes I see that they think it's good and it's actually just awful. It's too common, and it's very easy to perfect a resume, so you just got to work at it. It takes time. Then you get your cover letter, you get your 2-minute pitch. This is all things you can do during the summer to get all ready, because you want to stay ahead of the application process. You want to be one of the first ones to apply, because then the recruiter remembers you, sees that, okay, we just put out this job posting, and the next day put his resume in, so he's obviously super interested. So these are all things you can kind of develop during the year. One of the things that I developed before this past internship search process was, everyone knows the STAR method, situation, task, action, result. That's how you respond to a behavioral interview question. And then there's that STARL. So like after those 4 steps, there's the lesson. And that's really a big part of it. Recruiters want to know what you learned from that experience. So I actually created the document. I recommend everyone to do it. It's put down every story you have, whether it be class projects, club positions, previous internships, jobs. Just write down every story and a question that it could be connected to. So like, I worked on this project for my club, and recruiter question could be, how did you teamwork based? Show me an example of how you worked with a team and solved a problem. So you can kind of connect those stories to questions that could be asked. And then you literally write down, okay, what was the situation? What was the task, action, result, and lesson? And then have that. So that's something you can review. If you do that in the summer, you have that ready. You can review it days before the interview, in the waiting room. It can be in your portfolio. These stories are ready in your mind. And that way you don't forget stories. That could have been a really good experience, but if you just totally forgot about it, you'll never talk about it. So that's just a really important document to have.
It's a super good piece of advice.
Yeah, definitely. I try to tell everyone to do that. It really cleans up the process and helps you out when you could go in and talk to a recruiter, and then the next day is the interview. So you have very little turnaround to prepare. So you want all of that ready. So in that time period, you can really just focus on researching the company. So that's really the next part. You do all the research, everything from the stock price to different initiatives that have grown to problems they've had and everything about it. Because the more you can bring that up during the interview, they know you're interested. They know you've done your research, and that really impresses them. And then, so that's really the things I did prior to interviewing with Alpharez.
Okay, so let's switch gears here and talk more a little bit more specifically about what you did. So in terms of, you've met with the recruiter on campus, 2 or 3 times now. Like, how did you go about it? Was there like an online application, or what did you submit?
Yeah, so I had an online application. I also emailed her once I turned in that online application, just like making her aware that my information is on file. They really like that. It shows initiative there. And then you just wait and you hope that you get that interview slot. And once you do, you got to start preparing for that interview, doing all the research that I previously mentioned.
Okay, so you submitted your application. How did they notify you that you were moving on to the next steps for the interview?
So because this one was through Fisher, it would be through like the online portal. I can't remember what it's called, but all Fisher students have it. So they send you an invite. They say, this is the day, pick a slot. My personal experience, it wasn't a personal one-on-one interview on campus. It was a big event at the headquarters where everyone came on the same day, and it was a day-long event. So that's a little different than some other people might have, but either way, they'll contact you through the portal.
So absolutely. So let's talk about that day-long event now. So I'm guessing you got scheduled to, attend whatever that day?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it was for this RFA. So there was 100 people interviewing, and they were picking 12. So first of all, get there early. That's just like a common mistake people make that will just ruin it for you. Get there early, and then it was a several process. I did an interview. I did 2 interviews with 2 different groups. You actually sat down at a computer and you were given 30 minutes. There was like an Excel test, analyzing a P&L statement, some other, finance things. It's actually not that difficult. It scares a lot of younger students that don't know what to expect, but as long as you pay attention during your basic accounting classes, it's not bad. Do some reviewing beforehand and the common like balance sheet, P&L statement, different things like that, just to make yourself aware of what you had known before and you might have forgotten. Because you never know, especially finance related, you don't know what they might question you on. And they understand you're a college student, so you're not going to know everything, but they just want to see how you process the information and kind of give results.
Sure. So let's delve into that a little bit more. So you show up to Elbrands. Are there 100 people in the room, or are you meeting with... Okay. So there's 100 people in the room. You mentioned that there's 2 interviews with the 2 groups. Yep. Are they interviewing with a group of 5 people, 10 people? Like, how does that actually look like?
Yeah, sure. So you really have to change your answers to who you're interviewing with. So, for example, one of them was more HR based. They were the human resources. So they don't know much about your role. They don't really care about finance. They just want to see that you're excited to work there, you want to work there, and you have some good stories to tell. So that's one way you have to kind of structure your answers. For example, if they ask you like what you want in the future, be very ambitious. You don't even need to say you want to stay in finance. Be like, I personally wanted to one day do brand management, which is nothing finance related, but they just want to see, you want to be successful, you want to explore different areas. So that's an HR interview. So one of them was an HR, 2 people interviewing with them, a lot of behavioral questions, just the regular, times you've been a leader, different team building, different things like that. All of these questions you can find on Google at any time. And then the second set was 2 other people, and that was a finance team that was interviewing me. So that's when you have to shift your answers. Like, you don't want to answer, I want to do brand management, when they expect you to be in finance, and like that's what you're supposed to like to do. So you got to structure your answers to be like, oh, I'm very interested in this role, I want to become a financial analyst. You're not really lying, you don't know what's going to happen in the future, but you want to answer what they want you to answer also. You need to be able to change your answers. So that takes a lot of practice. I've probably done like 30 mock interviews over my last 3 years in school, so it takes a while to understand how to word your answers, but keep that in mind. Who you're interviewing with is a big part.
Definitely. So you have these 2 interviews. You're analyzing this P&L statement, an Excel sheet. What are the next steps then?
Yeah, so in that computer lab, they make you do that. And then when you were interviewing with the finance team specifically, they actually had your results right in front of them, and they were questioning you on like, what was your thought process of doing this step? What was your thought process in there? Because they're actual finance people that want to know how you think about the numbers. So that was that part of it. And that was definitely things that people don't really get much practice in. A lot of people get practice in behavioral questions, but that's a little bit more challenging, especially right out of college. So you got to kind of do your studying beforehand to make sure you know what you're looking at.
Definitely. So after the interviews, then what happened after that?
So I'm assuming they had 50 people actually, because they had 2 different days. I interviewed on a Friday, and then the next Friday they had the second set of 50, I'm assuming, interviews. And then you ask in your interview, what are the next steps? That's usually a typical last question you can ask. She had said, okay, after that second set of interviews, the Monday after that, you'll get a call if you got in it or not. So that's what you were kind of expecting. You walk out, you send the thank you note, obviously, and you get the contact information from all the interviewers, so you can send them all an individualized thank you note. But then I actually, 3 days later, before they had actually interviewed the second set of people, I'd gotten a call for the internship offer. So that was lucky. They'd obviously thought that I was capable and they didn't need to interview the other people before giving me an offer. And they want you to. That's what a lot of students don't realize. Like, if you're a good student and you seem excited about the company, they're fighting for you as much as you're fighting to be in that internship. So they're trying to impress you. They knew if they waited for another week, I might have accepted someone else. So if you're a capable student, they're going to really kind of encourage you to come with them and tell you as soon as possible, things like that.
I totally agree. That is a great answer. So also, first of all, congratulations on getting the job. Now that you are now working at All Brands. So let's kind of switch gears here and talk less about the application process and more about, your time at school and, how you crafted yourself over those 3 years to land that type of internship. So I guess first let's talk, what sources did you utilize on campus?
I mean, it first started off with, you kind of have to understand what you want to do. And a lot of students obviously don't know what they want to do. I mean, it's so broad. What is finance? Everyone's telling you to do one thing or the other. So doing that research, there's different clubs within the school that focus on each part: consulting, investment banking, financial services. So you go talk to those people, really understand what a career in that field means. And then you got to start analyzing, okay, what do I want? Do you want that work-life balance? Do you want to go really hard the first 5 years of career and then maybe you can move on? Do you want to work with customers or businesses? So that's like the first step, really understanding what you want. Because back in the day, I would apply to everything under the sun that were nothing related to each other. And once you go in and they ask you why, you need to have an answer. And honestly, half the interviews I didn't have an answer. I just knew, okay, that's a big company, okay. But once you have an answer, it's much easier to get the role because they understand what you can connect with that person. And then, so I luckily was in a business fraternity, but there's all these resources through the school. Through the years, many different drafts of my resume, continuously improving it, the wording of every answer, making it almost perfect. So that's one of the things I really focus on, and people, all the HR reps and things have noticed, because there isn't really a mistake in structuring or anything like that in my resume. They know you spent your time. You didn't make this resume the night before. And then mock interviews are huge. Majority of the internships and full-time positions that right out of college, they're not going to be technical interviews. They're going to be behavioral questions. So getting that star sheet that I talked about before, understanding all your stories, knowing all the experiences you've had, just to have that at the tip of your fingers. Because sometimes some companies I interviewed with, it would be 2 interviewers and there would be 15 questions each. And at that point, a lot of people don't even have that many stories. So you really want to write down every story so you don't repeat the same story, have every experience from a small part-time job to different internships to clubs, have that listed. And then studying that and understanding your experiences, remembering them, because once you're in an interview, you can't really look at your notes. Like, you need to know what you've done.
You need to know you.
Exactly. And you need to know how to word just a small experience in a bigger way to make it seem like you did more than you actually did. And then sometimes you got to do that. And then, having the cover letter ready, having your 2-minute pitch at career fairs ready. All of these things can be done the summer before. So once your school starts and all these things start right off the bat, for us, you don't need to be stressing about, getting ready. You'll be ready already for the career fairs and interviews and things like that.
Absolutely. So I think first, like you mentioned, that star sheet, in terms of story, if you have one key takeaway from Maneesh, I think that alone is, worth its weight in gold. How about in terms of coursework? You mentioned your double major. That's definitely not easy. How did you manage that? And how do you think that helped you land where you are today?
Yeah, school is one thing, the classes, first of all, it's good grades. If you don't make the minimum, you're not going to even be in the pile of interviews that they're going to offer. You need to make sure, and a big focus I made was earlier the better. So if you keep your grades up your freshman year, sophomore year, when it's a little bit easier, not necessarily not for all classes, obviously, but
Sure.
Keep it up that once you get to those hard classes, your GPA won't move that much because you've had that strong base at the beginning 2 years of great GPAs, that you can focus more on the searching for the jobs rather than, okay, my grades, all my minutes need to be spent on the grades. And then, so the grades are one thing. There's a lot of different opportunities. Fisher has different industry immersions. So if you're interested in retail or consumer goods, different things like that, you can go into a class specifically focused on that, where they bring in executives. They really talk about what they do in the real world, and you understand that field specifically. So I took consumer goods industry immersion, and although it wasn't retail and consumer goods are very similar, where they sell a product in the store, and a lot of the same things apply to both. And that's when I started realizing how much there is to retail and consumer goods, the marketing side, the operations side, the finance side, and all of that working together and the innovation involved. So some of those classes were very helpful.
Absolutely. And then the only other thing I want to switch gears to in terms of like your college life would be, what you did on campus. You mentioned that you were in a business fraternity. How did that help you and get you where you are today?
Yeah, so there's three things. Obviously, the grades. The grades are the minimum. That's how you get through the door. The clubs. So I'm big on extracurriculars, leadership positions. It's all about the stories you can tell in an interview. I mean, for example, I'm in the leadership positions now. After my beginning full-time roles, when you're interviewing for that next position, 3 or 4 years down the road, you will never talk about college again. You'll never mention it. But this is when they ask you about those clubs, and you need to have all those stories. And one thing is like, okay, this group project in my marketing class. Okay, every kid had done that. Clubs are the next level. You can really make a difference in how the stories you tell of the clubs you're involved in. The higher the leadership position, the more responsibility you have, the bigger. So I'm the president of the Undergraduate Economics Society. That is an open club for, depending on the meeting, there's anywhere from 20 people to 80 people, and I lead those meetings and I bring in recruiters and things like that. So that's one thing. I was also a vice president of my regular fraternity, so that gave me responsibility over like 120 people. And that's something you can talk about, the different experiences of balancing the sides of managing all these students, what they want, what alumni want, what the nationals want, things like that. So, and then I also, the business attorney, and that was mostly the development, the resume. Also, a large part of that is I help the younger students now and train them in the similar thing. And that shows leadership skills, being able to develop other people, which is also what companies want. So having as many experiences is all about the stories you tell. And then I stress this to everyone, internships are the number one thing. The more important and relevant the story you can tell, the better. So classwork is one thing. Clubs are another thing that's better. When you can tell an experience from a real company, a project you work on, real life, that's the best possible story. And that's the advantage I had. I had 2 internships of experiences that I could talk about. And I really think that that's what really brought me up in their eyes. So those are the 3 kind of parts of your life. And you really need to go full out on all 3 from a young age, as in like right off the bat, freshman year. Try to get into that club, because if you join a club your senior year, you're not going to get it. So you got to start there. And then maybe your sophomore year, junior year, you can get a vice president, president role. And then you'll actually have stories to tell that matter to the recruiters.
Absolutely. I think that's a really awesome piece of advice, and definitely something that these students should take away from today.
Mm-hmm.
Looking back now that you do have the job, is there anything, either in your college time or the application process, that you would have done differently?
Yeah, I wish I had narrowed down what I wanted to do earlier. Okay. So like my last 2 internships could have been more relevant to what I wanted to do. A lot of the focus, I spent a lot of time trying to research investment banks and consulting firms. And if I just did not waste that time later on, like for one thing's doing that freshman year, but I was still doing that like junior year. And by then you kind of want to know what you want to be in. If you want to be in consulting, you've got to join that, the consulting clubs on campus from freshman year. You can't decide that late, because at that point, there's students that are competing for that same internship and knew that that was what they wanted to do. And that sounds so much better than me coming in and being like, I want to do investment banking. Nothing I've done, none of the clubs I've done resemble that, but this is what I want to do now. So I wish I'd had kind of focused and talked to people and learned what I wanted to do earlier. So I got to kind of not waste my time looking at those type of companies and really focused.
Okay, absolutely. Well, other than that, I don't think there's any more questions I have from you. Again, I want to wish you congratulations on your internship at L Brands. And again, thank you again for taking the time today to interview for us. I think you gave us a lot of good insights for these kids to take away. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, thanks, Maneesh.